Welcome to Living with Dr. Monica Shaw, where we discuss different ways of living our lives and finding fulfillment in a world that often pushes a single version of success, timeline, and identity. Living fully means honoring your truth, and charting our own path on a road less traveled can feel hard. Whether you've chosen a non-traditional life or life chose it for you, this show is here to support your journey and remind you that you're not alone. I'm very excited to have Natasha Bakht as a guest today. I know Natasha from having been in the same dance company and school in Toronto and later being a dancer in her choreographies. I have always admired Natasha, first from afar as a dancer and then as a mentor and friend. Natasha is an award-winning dancer and choreographer, a professor of law at the University of Ottawa, and she has written extensively in the area of law, culture, and minority rights. Her research on the niqab analyzes the unwarranted popular panic concerning Muslim women who cover their faces, and it explores systemic barriers to inclusion perpetuated by Canada's legal and political system. She brought together this research in her book, In Your Face: Law, Justice, and Niqab-Wearing Women in Canada, which was listed in the Hills Times 100 Best Books of 2020 and received the 2020-2021 Huguenot Society of Canada Award. Natasha has made her mark on both the worlds of dance and law, and she is the first person I personally knew who was leading a parallel career with dance, which was a major influence in helping me see that path for myself. Natasha challenges the mainstream in the most natural way, and her insights are both wise and matter-of-fact. She makes living life on your own terms seem inevitable. I hope you see that too. Enjoy. Natasha, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. I really thought of you as one of the first people that I wanted to have on this podcast. I feel like you just create your life based off of you, and I really think that people could learn from your approach. So Natasha actually choreographed my first solo in Indian contemporary dance about 10 years ago. And during that time, I had the chance to stay with her and her family in Ottawa. You know, I really felt like I was welcomed into her world. And I got the chance to witness the most pure and accepting love that I've ever seen in a family. Spending that time together really helped me broaden my definition of family, what a family means, and what a family can be. And Natasha officially stretched the legal boundaries of family together with her friend and colleague, Linda Collins. I love Linda, by becoming legal co-mothers of their son, Ilan, though they're not in a conjugal relationship. Natasha, I am constantly in awe of your ability to push the boundaries of what we see as the right way to live, and all with a sense of class, intelligence, and kindness. And this is why I knew that you would be perfect for this podcast. So yeah, why don't we just start by having you share with us a bit about your journey towards creating your unique life and any influences that you've had that have helped you kind of craft this life for yourself.
Well, thank you so much for the extremely kind introduction and very loving introduction. It's very much appreciated. It's hard for me to believe that we did that piece 10 years ago. It feels like not quite that long ago. And, you know, you were welcomed into our life and home because you're such a special person yourself. And, you know, it's always a two-way street. So let me start that there. I guess what I would say right off the bat is I didn't plan my life in the way that it has played out. I sort of happened to be in the right place at the right time. Things fell into my lap, and I think I was just open to lots of different possibilities. I guess major influences in my life and who certainly gave me the possibility to sort of lead the life that I do are my parents. So, I mean, I was very fortunate to have an extremely loving household. So I had parents who really adored me and, you know, gave me many, many opportunities to explore education, arts, life, really. So I felt very valued from a very young age, and it wasn't associated with any kind of accomplishment. I think they had expectations and hopes and desires for me. I really, if they had those, I think I internalized them and they became part of what I wanted to do. My parents are immigrants from India who came to, I was born in England. They first moved to England and then they came to Canada, and they sort of were typical immigrants in that they really wanted their child to be exposed to everything. My mom always wanted to dance, but she was brought up in a very small village in India where there simply was no dance teacher, or, there would be somebody who would pass by every few months and she would take that opportunity to dance. And so it was really important for my mom that I have the opportunity to dance. My parents were also just really excited to be in Canada. And, they wanted their kid to learn to swim and to skate and, skate on the Rideau Canal. And so, I was a very typical immigrant child in that I was involved in lots of different extracurricular activities. Some were, to retain some connection to our Indian culture through music, dance. Others were to really be exposed to, what they saw as Canadian culture. So as I said, music, dance. I remember actually being in a lot of different classes and my dad actually saying to me one day, if you ever feel like you don't want to do something, that's okay. You can just tell us. And I was this very tiny child who found swimming to be, I was just always cold and turned purple in swimming class. And so I said, is that right? Okay, in that case, I'd like to drop swimming. And my dad said, oh, but beta, not swimming. Swimming's actually really important for you to do. It's a really important life skill. So, they had sort of a way of talking to me that would persuade me. And I really enjoyed all of these different activities. And I think I say they were a major influence because it was very important for them that I live, as they put it, an all-rounded life. What they meant by that was that I have exposure to, the kind of traditional academic life, but that I also be involved in sports, and I also be involved in the arts. And, I had no idea at the time how important that was going to be for my future well-being and sense of balance. And so that was really critical and formative. And then I think the other way in which my parents were extremely influential was they came from very different backgrounds themselves. So my mom is a Bengali Hindu, and my dad comes from a Muslim family in Delhi. So they spoke different languages. They came from different religious traditions, and they brought me up with all of that. So while growing up in Toronto, I knew that I had a Bengali community and I knew that I had an Urdu speaking and Muslim community. And I knew that it was unusual that I had two communities and not just, a single heritage that I came from. But they were very open-minded about that and surrounded us with people who loved us for who we were and accepted that sense of difference. And so I knew that they had chosen a path that was different from the ones that, they had come from. So I knew that to be the case. And I knew that it wasn't the easiest path for them, but that they had managed to do it without actually breaking down family ties. Like there might have been some hiccups or bumps along the way, but actually we had a really, loving family set of relationships all over the world. So that was really important too, to just really understand that I could come from a different place and still be very welcomed in a bunch of different communities. So I guess that was those were my major influences growing up.
Yeah, I love that. I know we've talked about parents and the support of parents and how important that is. I feel the same way about mine. And I'm hearing having that foundation of love and support and acceptance truly for who you are. That is what helps to have you branch out and explore different things and just lead whatever life is unique to you. So
Yeah,
just by accepting you as you are, you can grow into who you are.
exactly. It's like having that stability or that foundation of love, of value really allows you to blossom. And it doesn't have to be, I think, not everyone comes from a home like mine. So it doesn't have to be that love is coming from the parents.
Mhm.
It can come from friends. It can come from aunties and uncles and grandparents. But it's nice when, that comes early because you just have a sense of self-esteem that grounds you.
Yeah, I think about that too, that not everybody has that privilege, right? Of coming from a family that is supportive. They support you, they love you. And there are other ways that can happen.
Yes, yes. I mean, I think the other major influence for me was my dance teacher, who, of course, you know as well, Moni. Dr. Monica Tucker was teaching and performing dance in Toronto in the 1970s, and I met her in the late 60s and really just sort of fell in love with her as a performer. I was very young. I was 7 years old. And my mom she took me to one of her, Monica, these students' performances and said, would you like to learn dance like this friend of mine now, Nova Bhattacharya? I went to her Arangetram, or her dance graduation. And my mom said, would you like to learn dance like Nova? And I said, yeah, sure. That seems like a good idea. I was 6 years old. And I met Menakadi and happened to be in the right place at the right time. She was willing to teach individual classes to me in her basement home in North York. She was a very talented, gifted teacher. So I literally had 1 hour a week, one-on-one with her. And she believed in me and she saw something in me and I saw something in her, that we just really, fed off of each other. And what I loved about her was, just how committed she was to her dance life. And she was so enthralled by it. She just had so much joy, when she was teaching or performing or creating. And I just loved that. And I wanted to be like her, really, when I was very young. I mean, obviously, as I got older, I could see, how we were different, and the things that really turned her crank didn't necessarily turn mine. So I was able to kind of draw out things that I adored about her and that I wanted to emulate, and other things that I could sort of assess and say, I can see that this really is important to her, but it's not, what I want to do. She was just the joy that she found in her, like she knew from a very young age. She used to always say, I'm married to my dance. I never wanted to get married because I'm so committed to performing and teaching and really disseminating this practice. It was really inspiring to see somebody who was so passionate.
Yes, right. And that in itself at that time, but even now, is a rarity, right? For somebody to devote themselves so much to something and really go fully all in.
Yes.
Yeah. There's so many voices, right? There's so many things that are coming in and telling us, you should do this, you shouldn't do that. And this is where you belong. These are the categories that you get placed in. I'm wondering, you've struck me as somebody who lives the life that you want, regardless of what others may think or what those other voices may be. And I'm wondering, is there a certain perspective or attitude or something that you have found helpful for that approach?
I would say that is an approach that I sort of grew into. So there was a large period of my life when I was studying, practicing dance, practicing law, or being an academic, when I really thought of the two worlds as quite separate. And I was very happy to have the people in my dance world believe that I was, a dancer and choreographer, and that's what I did. And for the people in my law world to think that I was a lawyer and a professor, and that's what I did. And there was good reasons for me to want to keep those separate, because there was a sort of belief, certainly that if I wasn't committed to my art form fully, that I somehow wasn't a real artist. And, those were practical concerns around applying for funding from arts councils. And, I even had my dean at one point say to me, it's great that you've done this dance thing, but I think it's time to just write now, just really write more. I think, my approach at the time was to just sort of quietly listen to what those people are saying or what the rules are, and just keep doing my work, just keep doing a little bit of dance, keep doing a little bit of law, because that's what I wanted to do. But I wasn't advertising it. I'm not going to pretend that I was necessarily fully comfortable in being open about, living, now we call it a parallel career. I think I just quietly went about my work. After years of doing that, I realized that, first of all, I'm much more established. I'm much more established as an artist. I'm much more established as a professor. I've gotten tenure. I'm a full professor now. So at a certain point, you sort of earn the right to do whatever you want. But I now have no problem saying, actually, I do both. I do law and I do dance. And I guess saying that more openly has allowed me to see the connections between the two. And in fact, it's allowed me to see that they're not as separate as I think they are, that they're actually very connected. And, the themes that I'm interested in artistically are often the themes that I'm interested in academically as well. So again, I'm going to say that my approach to people who, thought that maybe this was an unusual path or had some judgment around how I was going about doing it was to sort of just quietly listen, but mostly ignore and just do what I wanted to do. At a certain point, I had to tell myself that I was doing this. I was going to continue to do both careers. And I had to accept that maybe for certain periods of my life, I might not be producing as much art as somebody who was doing it full time, or I might not be producing as many academic pieces, articles, publications. And I had to accept that, maybe feeling like I'm underperforming in one or two of these areas. But ultimately, I think at a certain point, I had to make that decision that I'm going to do both of these things, but it might mean that I am feeling like I'm not producing. The output is somehow different. It may or may not be, when you compare it ultimately at the end of a few years or a lifetime. But I think accepting that this is what makes you feel like, I can't quite imagine my life without dance or law. It's very much a part of who I am. And I wouldn't want to give one up, in order to produce a few more books or to produce a few more dance pieces. So I think it's about navigating what it is that makes sense for you. And of course, people are going to have opinions. People have opinions about all sorts of things. So, and sometimes they're really helpful and sometimes they're not. So I think for me, it's always been a matter of listening, taking it in, but not necessarily coming to a conclusion right away. Assessing, playing things out. Well, if it doesn't work, if it's not feeling right, you're feeling exhausted, then yes, definitely time to take a step back and rethink. But for me, what I've always found is if I can get the scheduling right, then in fact, doing both things, very rejuvenating, very fulfilling. So working on a dance piece while still teaching academically feels like a break. I don't need to go on a vacation necessarily because, it's so different from sitting at my computer or lecturing in front of students that it does really rejuvenate me in a different way. It uses different but also similar parts of my brain, but in different ways.
Yeah, I remember when I was first thinking, how can I blend these worlds together? Like, how do they come together? I really felt like a lot of the things that you just said were helpful for me. And one was that idea of you really can't compare yourself to somebody who is doing fully dance and fully the other thing. It's just really not a fair comparison. And I understood that kind of like logically at the time. And now I feel like I'm more understanding it emotionally, where it's just not a fair comparison. Like, I know we compare ourselves all the time to others. I know I do. And if you're living your life and it's going to look different from somebody else's, then you really can't compare, right? It sounds like you also had those other voices that were like, are you going to be a dancer? Or are you going to be a law professor? What are you going to do here? You got to make a choice. And I really felt like I had to make a choice as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And you do have to make choices, but it doesn't have to be that ultimate choice, I think. I think for me, I've always found that I am more productive when I'm happier. For me, the key was just figuring out what makes me happy. And actually, once I figured that out, I realized, oh yeah, I have no desire to end my dance career just because I'm entering into my 40s or my 50s, or even when I started law school, I was in my 30s and I thought, I guess this is the time that I should, I've done dance for many years now. So maybe this is the time to move into a different direction. A lot of dancers do that. They dance at the National Ballet for many years and then they go into medicine. I contemplated that. I thought, yeah, that's an interesting path. I could do things that way. But then just found myself not really able to or want to give up dance. So then it just became about what choices can I make so that I can continue to do, the dance that I want to do. And so there were things like when I was in my first year of law school, everyone for the summer was trying to get a job in a law firm because that's how you get experience. That's how you determine what area you want to specialize in. And it's not easy to get those summer jobs. And so I went through the struggle of trying to find one of those summer jobs and then just realized I think I'd rather dance. I think I'd rather just spend the 4 months doing the dance work because the opportunity was there. And I thought, in law school, I'm going to become a lawyer. I'm probably going to be able to work in law for the rest of my life. It's okay for me to take a summer to do dance. You know, you have to sort of make those choices and feel a little uncomfortable when you're coming back to your second year of law school. What did you do in your summer? Nothing to do with law, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
So you do make choices, but they don't have to be drastic ones that, lead you into one area only, for example.
Yeah, I really like that because you make choices along the path, but it doesn't have to be the choice, where you go in one direction or another. What I'm hearing is kind of checking in with yourself to be like, what is it that I truly want to do with this choice along the path? And then that leads you to your unique life.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I think when I talk about organizing time, one of the things that I did was organize my time differently depending on, so I might say to myself, I'm going to give myself a year to work professionally in the dance world and only do that and see how that makes me feel. And then make some decisions after that. Or I might give myself a period of time where I'm quite literally going to be writing in the morning. And in the afternoon, I'm going to be in the studio. So there are different ways to organize your time so that you can make well thought out decisions. Sometimes it's hard to know
It is.
until you experience something. That I also did that.
Right. Yeah, a bit of experimenting, right? Like, and how does this feel when I do it this way? And yeah,
Exactly.
I agree. When you're stepping out into a path that's not really formed or known, right? Like you're charting a path that you've never seen it done. How do you do that? I think that's why I found it so helpful to have conversations with you. You're like my touch base, What do you think about this? And I just really appreciated that you've kind of just tried things out for yourself. And there wasn't really a path. There wasn't really anybody even telling you this is how you have a parallel career, but you figure it out and just check in with yourself to make those choices.
Yes, exactly.
Are there any challenges that you feel like you've faced in building this life for yourself? If so, how have you dealt with them?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, I've been very fortunate that I have surrounded myself with people who are really encouraging of the choices that I've made. As I've mentioned, there's always a few people who have some value judgments about the approach that you're taking. Fortunately for me, they actually weren't formative in my life. They were sort of peripheral. I mean, I guess, your boss is not exactly peripheral. But, you do have a lot of autonomy when you're in academics. You never really have a boss in the same way that one might if you were working in, I don't know, the finance industry or something. So I thought of them as peripheral. So it was perhaps easier for me to just, as I say, quietly listen and then ignore if I didn't agree. But I would have to say that for the most part, I've been very fortunate that it's been a very positive experience to work in both of these worlds. And I think when I was younger, it was more unusual. It was something that I was doing so I did feel a little bit unusual. Now it's not at all. I see people doing this kind of thing all the time. So, it's just people sort of coming out of the woodwork and you sort of realize, oh, lots of people have been doing this for a long time. And maybe it's just not been as well known or we haven't known each other. So that has been a really very wonderful experience, very joyous experience to see the way in which people have done that. I guess my own dad has done that all along. So my father is a world-renowned bridge engineer, but one of his passions has always been translation. And so he's always translated Urdu poetry into English. And he's just always done both. And I guess I had that living role model along the way at all times. It's so kind of always been known to me that I forgot to mention it, But yes, he always had these two passions and just kind of went about his passions. He just sort of put his head down and did the work.
Yeah.
And, I mean, he's sort of annoyingly prolific in both fields. So he's not somebody I necessarily want to compare myself to because he's just somebody who has been able to produce so much. But yeah, I guess he was a role model too, without me even realizing it.
I've also learned just in the last couple of years, there's so many people who are doing multiple things. I actually recently found out there's a term for us. It's slashies.
I have no idea.
I know, I know. There is a Slashies Summit that happens where people who are leading parallel careers in various ways, they come together. And yeah, I've recently heard about organizations where people are both dancers and in medicine or health sciences. And I also have been starting to combine mental health themes into my dance work. And you kind of just find ways. Of course, people have multiple interests. That
Yeah.
sounds like it would be a given.
Yeah. I mean, I think that if I always say that if, I mean, I chose my parents put me in a form of dance that is Bharatanatyam, so the South Indian classical technique. If Bharatanatyam had been established the way ballet was in Canada, so if there was an opportunity for me to go to a national Bharatanatyam school where I do my dance work, but I also have the opportunity to kind of do basic academics up to high school level, I might have been just a dancer. I might have been. But, I didn't, when I saw what Menakadi did as a dancer, she was not just a dancer, not just a choreographer, but a teacher. And she ran this ginormous dance school. And I think for me, I liked teaching in dance, but I didn't want it to be my bread and butter. If there was an opportunity for me to perform only, train, in this kind of focused way, I think I would have gone down that route, but that was never an opportunity. That opportunity wasn't there for me. Those role models weren't there for me. And so that's why I sort of always had other dreams. I always imagined, from a very young age that I would be a lawyer. And so when I got to the age where I was suddenly being offered a job at a dance company in my early 20s, and I thought, oh, I didn't realize that I could be a professional dancer having the training that I have. My parents reminded me, but didn't you want to be a lawyer? I said, yeah, I do, but I feel like I have to pursue this dance opportunity. So I think that's what I mean by I didn't plan this. I think if it had been planned better, if the structures were differently available to me, I might have been a dancer and a choreographer solely. Because they weren't there, I just developed other interests. And then I just found myself unable to make a decision between two. And so, yeah.
Yeah, there's this sense of kind of just like rolling with life, right? Like,
Yes.
those are the opportunities that presented themselves. And then you make that choice of what do I feel like doing? Okay, I actually feel like going and exploring this dance opportunity. And then step by step, you end up where you're meant to be, right?
Yeah.
Have there been any joys that you maybe weren't expecting in leading this life?
So many. So many. I mean, it's just such a wonderful thing to be able to pursue the thing that makes you happy. I don't find myself getting into ruts in my career. I find like I don't really feel like I've had a midlife crisis because I've just had different ways in which to, if I feel like I might be getting stuck, of course, everybody feels that way. If I feel like I might be getting stuck in a particular world, I can just set it aside. I can put it to rest for a few days, minutes, months, and try something else. So that has been amazing. It just gives you so many other opportunities. I've had the opportunity to tour the world, but I haven't had to do it in a way that has wrecked my body. So I'm 52 years old and still very much able to dance because I haven't overused my body. It really just happened because I was not dancing as much as other people. So that's been quite wonderful. You just meet people from so many different walks of life, and of course that can happen even if you don't have a parallel career, but I'm able to kind of make connections that I wouldn't necessarily have made. I love the fact that I can use my performance skills when I teach, right? I mean, you're really trying to communicate something when you're an artist. There's a message that you're trying to get across, and that's exactly what you're doing when you're teaching. So seeing those connections it's really been wonderful. And I think it allows me to go deeper into, ideas, themes, ways of communicating. That has been really, really special. And it's still something that I'm learning, right? It's still very much, I see myself as a student in both of the worlds that I'm in, and that's it's kind of wonderful. You just sort of realize, oh, curiosity is a really great thing. So many things remain new if you're curious. So I've been able to kind of remain curious in both of these worlds and also in the interconnected world. So yeah, it's been a wonderful, I wouldn't choose, if I'd had to go back and redo things, actually wouldn't do anything differently. Because it really provided me with so much stimulation, so much love, so much joy.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept, that the nice side effect of leading a life that you're creating along the way is it's new. It's always new, and it kind of keeps things exciting. And
Yes.
there's the sense of curiosity that is inherent in that process because you don't know. You don't know like what the path is. So you're kind of just forming it along the way. Yeah, it can be a really beautiful thing. Yeah. Are there any lessons that you've learned along the way in building your life, your unique life, that you think could help someone who is going against the grain?
I guess one of the big lessons is practice, training. I think it's very normal to feel nervous about doing something, whether it's stage fright or, trying something new. Something that's really helped me, whether it's been in law or whether it's been in dance. I guess in law, I would call it preparation. In dance, I would call it training or practice. That's really helped me. So from a very young age, probably because when you're learning a classical technique, you have to develop a certain amount of rigor in your practice. And so you do things over and over and over and over again. And that has always given me it develops you physically, but it also develops you mentally. And that has worked for me in dance, but also in law. So there have been lots of times when I feel like I can't quite do this. And then I have to sort of remind myself, well, why would I be able to do that? It's brand new. It's something you've never done before. So, cut yourself some slack and just take one step at a time. And so then I prepare or I practice or I take the time to just review things or do something over and over and over again. And I cannot stress how important that has been, this idea of practice. And because it allows, first of all, what you're saying is give yourself the time to become the expert. No one becomes an expert in just a minute. It really takes time. So that, I think, is something you can do for yourself. If you find, for example, that you're just terrified of performing, if you take the time to practice what it is you're going to perform, ingraining whatever that is into your body, into your mental, into your psyche, so that it doesn't have to be terrifying. It's probably still going to be nerve-wracking. Frankly, I think nerves are a good thing when you're performing, but it doesn't have to be debilitating. And taking that time to practice really, really helps. And it's the same if you are writing, for example. Like nobody writes a brilliant novel overnight. You take the time to do a little bit of writing every single day. And it may have nothing to do with the novel that you're working on, but you're practicing a skill. That's something that I think I've done in different aspects of my life for many, many, many years. And when something feels difficult, even if it's like an injury, and so the goal is to get better. Well, how does one do that? It's slowly. It's taking one step at a time. It's rebuilding, the kind of injured shoulder, if it's a shoulder, but also, learning, okay, but if my shoulder's been doing too much here, I need to strengthen my back. So then you build the exercises slowly. So that idea of practice, whether it's mental or physical, is something that I think a lot of people can incorporate into their lives. And, there's different ways of thinking about it. It can be meditation. It can be building a healthier lifestyle. There's lots of different ways of thinking about it. But rather than kind of taking on too much all at once, I like to sort of break it down and think about what are the small steps that are going to help me get to whatever this end goal is. I guess that's the biggest piece
Yeah.
of advice.
Yeah. I mean, I think that might be something that goes unnoticed. When you see a person's life and you're just seeing the outsides, right? You don't really realize all of the day-to-day practice and training that's gone into it. And, we might think of something for ourselves, but then immediately afterwards think, oh, well, I can't do that. That's too scary. That's too much for me. But like you're saying, if you approach it step by step and put in the work, put in the practice, it might become less scary. It might become less challenging to do. And then you develop the skill step by step.
You do. And you observe the changes. So you can see the progress. It's probably going to be small at first, but you build on it. And so it also allows you to become more attuned and aware with yourself and what you're achieving. What it does require is time. So you give yourself the time to develop, to grow, to blossom. And the nice thing about that is by giving yourself time, you're really giving yourself a chance at doing something. It is cutting yourself some slack, being really realistic and honest about the work that goes into changing something about yourself, acquiring a skill.
Right. Yeah. Acquiring a skill, creating a path.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you feel would help listeners in crafting their unique life?
I mean, I think I would say be open to all sorts of possibilities that you didn't even imagine. So for me, when I was in my mid to late 30s, I guess I was 36, I realized that I wanted to have children, but I wasn't in a relationship. And so there were lots of models out there of single moms by choice. And that's what I thought I was going to do. I thought I'm now financially stable. I have a job that, gives me a decent income. So I'd like to have a child. So I made that decision, read the requisite books, decided that I was going to use anonymous donor sperm and become a single mom by choice. And my son was born, and I always thought that he would be raised in an extended family, so I wasn't imagining raising him in a silo as a single parent. I knew my parents would be involved, aunties, uncles, friends. What I didn't know was that he'd eventually have another parent. And this other parent ended up being my friend, Linda Collins. And we didn't plan it. Ilan was born with multiple and complex disabilities, and Linda was a colleague of mine at the time. And we were friends. I wouldn't have called us best friends, but she was just a really supportive, friendly face. She offered to be my birth coach. And then she sort of fell in love with Ilan. And when we sort of realized that he was going to have some health issues, she was just there for me, as any friend would be, to talk me through some of the difficulties. And she was around a lot. And, we wouldn't have called it co-parenting at the time, but she was helping me. She was able to soothe Ilan. She had this very special relationship with Ilan. At a certain point, we were sort of calling her his godmother. And then she was thinking about having a child of her own, possibly adopting a child. And then she said to me, this sort of making a very long story short, but she said to me, I think I'd like to adopt Ilan. And I said, right. That makes complete sense. I mean, everything that you were doing is parenting. And so we embarked on this journey of, I think, realizing that we were both parents to Ilan, but also a legal journey of deciding that we wanted legal recognition for Linda as a parent to Ilan. And I would never in my wildest dreams have imagined that that would be, the way that I would create a family. And I'm just so glad that I was open to that, because it has been just an amazing experience to parent with, your best friend. It's really wonderful to parent with somebody, because the main reason is you get to share in the memories and the joys. And it's really only Linda who I can say, and perhaps my parents who I can say, remember when he used to do this? And she's going to get just as excited as I am in that insane way that parents do. Obviously, it's been extremely helpful in terms of labor. And, there is a lot of labor involved in parenting, and there's even more involved when you're parenting a child with multiple and complex disabilities. There has been just sort of practically a very helpful part of raising a child with another person. But it's just been a wonderful experience to have your best friend involved in like this most intimate aspect of your life. And it's opened up so many other friendships and familial relationships. So Linda's parents are very much a part of my life. My parents are very much a part of Linda's life. Linda has now partnered, and her partner is very much a part of my life. And Ilan, like we think of her as Ilan's step parent. They've now had a baby. So I have this new nephew in my life. I mean, I just couldn't have imagined. And, we all live in the same building. So we have this incredible community of love. And if I had really stuck to my, no, I'm going to be a single mom by choice, I just would have lost out on such a beautiful experience that I couldn't have imagined or pictured for myself. So I think it's always good to be open to other possibilities.
Yeah, really, that's what I was referring to when I was staying with you all. Even back then, there's just such a sense of love and community, and it was so pure because everybody's opting into it. Everybody is like, this is the choice that I'm making. It's so purely about love and family. And I really just felt so lucky to be a part of that.
Thank you. I mean, I feel lucky every day to be a part of it, I have to say. It's really special. And, we don't have any judgment about our family dynamic being better than a traditional one. I think what we feel really committed to is the idea that there can be multiple family forms, right? And they can all really produce wonderful living relationships for children to grow up in, and indeed for even adults. And that's what's been really wonderful, is to be able to kind of realize, often you can spend a long part of your life sort of looking for that right person to start this family with. And that can be stressful and hard on women in particular. And it's been so wonderful to just be like, actually, I've developed friendships for their life. I'm actually really good at that. And how wonderful to be able to, have a friendship be the basis upon which I form this family.
Yeah, and really it's that openness, what you said earlier, of having that openness to those experiences that you may not have projected for yourself, right?
Yeah.
If we box ourselves into that, no, this is the way that you do it. This is the only way that I can be happy, right? When really that's just not true.
Yeah, exactly. So it's good to be open to other possibilities, ones that you can imagine and ones that you can't imagine.
Natasha, this has been just so great. Thank you for doing this. I really have appreciated, just knowing you in general, but also having you today on the podcast. And I think that there's a lot that was said that people can gain from. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Moni. Very happy to be part of this.
So would you like to share a little bit about where people can find you if they'd like to know more about you or your work?
So this is an area where I am decrepit, and I, I'm terrible about having websites, but you can Google me and lots of stuff comes up. How's that? Sorry. So terrible at doing the promotion. So there is lots of information out there if you Google me, but I don't have a website.
That is perfectly fine. You know what? You're busy living your life.
I'm too busy doing the life to kind of be talking about the life, I think.
Exactly. Just living your life.
That's a generous way to look at it. Thank you.
Anytime. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, we'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Moni.
Thank you for joining us on Living with Dr. Monica Shaw, where we discuss different ways of living our lives and finding fulfillment in a world that often pushes one. I hope this series gives you more confidence in creating and living a life that fits you, not the mold. If you like what you heard and you're ready to feel seen, inspired, and supported in building your path, don't forget to hit subscribe. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and grow a community of people who are redefining what living means together. So please share and leave us a rating or review. You can also watch on our YouTube channel at Dr. Monica Shaw and find episode notes and bonus content at www.drmonicashaw.com. Finally, follow me on Instagram at Dr. Monica Shaw for more inspiration and resources. Until next time, keep living your unique life, because no matter what path we're on, it's all just living, and there's more than one way to do it.